Hello, everybody. Welcome to Artwork, our NASCAD alumni talks. So while our NASCAD community spans across the globe, our talk today is being hosted in Chibuktuk in Mi'kmaq on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. We are honored to speak, gather, and make artwork here. My name is Molly Cronin. I am a NASCAD alum with a BA from 2015. I'm the host of these artwork talks. These talks are a way to showcase the diverse paths that NASCAD students have taken in their careers after their time at school, and a chance for all of us as NASCAD community members to connect. And this week, our Valentine's Day topic is bottling design, and we'll be speaking with winemakers and vineyard owners Scott Dahmer, B Design 1986, and Michael Arno, B Design 1982. So welcome, guys. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Thanks for inviting me.
Molly. Yeah.
My pleasure. So to get us started, Scott, I can see the nice rows of wine bottles behind you. Maybe we'll start with you and we'll have you both tell us a little bit about your work as winemakers and about your vineyards.
Sure. Well, first of all, up front, I disclose that I am not a winemaker. I know enough. I know enough to get in trouble, but I've hired a very experienced winemaker, Lisa Street, and she comes from Gallo in California. She's excellent. She's wonderful. So she is responsible for all of the winemaking. My wife and I own the business, and I'm involved with it, 24/7. So I call myself a vintner. So I work very, very closely with the winemaker. We both make the decisions. I'm very much involved with the vineyard, the selling, everything. But as far as the technical part of winemaking, that is not me. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'm involved with the vineyard. I must, first of all, I have to kind of put out how it's all kind of set up here. We have a vineyard, which is 40 acres, and it's in a place called Pierce, Arizona, and the elevation is very high. It's at almost 5,200 feet. So It's not in the desert. It's got mountains in the background. It's got a creek running through it. So the temperature is a lot cooler. So it's almost comparable to California. We do get snow there. We get frost. We get hail. We get the whole shebang of challenges of being a farmer. It was our initial plan to have a winery and a tasting room and maybe a retirement house on the vineyard there. But it's so remote. It's beautiful, but it's so remote. And, we're getting up in age and, it's like 40 minutes to go to the grocery store. And it's like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to be that remote. I love to visit, but I don't think I'd want to stay there as a home. So it kind of took the model of the winery and took it into the bigger city called Wilcox, which is an agricultural town, not very big. And so we bought this apple warehouse and turned it into the winery and a custom crush winery. So that means we make wine for other clients as well. So we've got a separate vineyard, a separate winery, and 2 separate tasting rooms. So it's not like your conventional winery, vineyard, everything on one spot. Everything is kind of spread out. So needless to say, it's a lot of running around. It's a lot of fun, but so you get a sense of how I'm involved and what I'm doing.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be talking later about the climates in which everyone makes their wine. So I'm excited to learn more about Arizona wine growing because I'm not very familiar with it. But I think we'll turn over to Michael now and hear a little bit about your work. Michael.
So we started with Vinicol Arno. We were not in the wine business either, and we also are not winemakers. So my wife and I, Mara, invested in a property in 2017 in northwest Italy. So we're in the Asti region. So my family originally is English Italian. Mara's Portuguese, Polish originally. But we had an interest in wine and winemaking and thought this could be somewhat of a late career type project for us. So we invested in a property, and we spent the better part of the last 5 or 6 years building up the wine brand and the label and everything around the winery. I think, like Scott, we're very fortunate that we have a phenomenal winemaker that works with us. Even though all of our wine now is made on property, it wasn't when we started. And we also have great people that work with us on the agricultural and on the commercial side as well, that you need to have in this type of business. Even though we bought something, it was not a hobby for us. We wanted to really grow it as a business and make it a real business venture. And that has its challenges. And as I think Scott knows, in the wine business, not so straightforward. There's a lot of competition. And how you differentiate yourself really comes into play, right? And I think that certainly plays into some of the design factors. I think we'll talk a little bit more about as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd love to ask specifically about how your time at NASCAD influenced the work you do currently. Maybe we'll start with you, Michael.
I think it influenced almost everything through my career. I think it gave me a way of looking. It was almost it wasn't really coursework or things we did in school. It was a way of going about analyzing, looking at problems, and that throughout my career. If I look back, and I've looked back periodically and said, yeah, I could see where it made a difference to what I did. Yeah, there were some things that I did initially career-wise that were directly related to what I studied in school. But there are also things, I think, from how I've approached things, looked at problems over time, where NASCAD had a huge impact on me at that period in my life, and continues to this time as well. So for me, it's more a way of how I've looked at things over time and framed how we solve certain problems. And even though we're in wine now and we were in the tech business before, it's always the same type of thing ultimately that comes into play for me.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Scott, what about you? How do you think that your time at NASCAD influenced your work you do now?
Oh boy, I agree with Michael in every way. It's funny because I basically retired about 10 years ago, and that's when we decided to do the winery and the vineyard and stuff. So I thought after when you're retired, you think you're not going to do that job anymore, right? That is not the case. It is constant. I mean, it's everything. It's everywhere. It's how the interior looks of the tasting room. It's designing the logos. It's menus. It's websites. It's constant. I didn't think that my training and my education was going to be coming so handy. Really, because I'm very confident that I can take care of that part of the industry. But like I said before, winemaking, not so much. But as all, the advertising and how everything looks and designing, events and everything like that, it's constant. And it's funny because I'll share a little bit of the first thing that happened. The first thing what I had to do, of course, is design a logo, right, for the brand. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't design something for myself. It was so hard. It was like doing surgery on yourself. It was never good enough. I couldn't get through it. And then finally deciding something. And you said, you just got to do it, Scott. Just put it out there and just start from somewhere. And then, it all just fell into place.
Wonderful. Yeah. Oh, I'd love, maybe we'll jump into that question. The question of how does design factor into this business? Like, where are the places in the selling of wine, the showcasing of wine? Where does the design of wine come in, and where is it most impactful for you, do you find, Scott?
Well, I think what I do is I divide it up almost into three really big sections. You got to grow it, so it's the vineyard. Mm-hmm. Then you got to wine make it, and then you got to sell it. So those are three basic, huge areas. I mean, they're not small, any of them. So, I mean, just starting from the vineyard, I mean, I laid out the vineyard. I did everything. I did all the design for it. I have a little dot for every plant on a plan.
We do too.
So, and then, yeah, it comes in handy because I like to be organized, and it has to visually look good, and it also has to serve a purpose. And I think that's the basic training that we got at NASCAD is it has to be functional. You just can't have something pretty. It has to be beautiful for a reason. And I think that philosophy goes through everything I do, and I also so on the vineyard, just doing designs for the rows. I mean, just that alone, I was doing that, and then moving on to the winery. The winery is more industrial, but it's at the same time we have tours. We have winery tours, so I want to make sure that it's organized, it's clean, it looks impressive. I'll share a little story with you. When my mother came to visit, she was in Kitchener, and of course, flying to Arizona for the first time when she came down to actually see the winery. She's walking through and she says, "Scott, do you know what you're doing?" I go, "No, I really don't."
She didn't like the look of it.
Oh no, she was like, "This is like overwhelming, the big tank and the barrels and all the equipment."
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Do you know what you're doing? No, I've got people. But going back to the design, it influences me. There's nothing that there's no decision that I make on a daily basis that has not got back to a design decision, in all of the areas.
And you folks won an award for design, if I remember correctly, in 2014.
We did. Yeah. I worked closely with the architect and the engineers. Yeah. We repurposed an old Apple warehouse. It was just a shell.
Yes.
And I would like to have done it in LEEDs fashion, where everything is recyclable and sustainable. But at that time, it's expensive to do, and there's all kind in time. There's a lot of time involved with that. So I made it so that it was just going to be a business mission for me. It was going to be repurposing of all items I could find. So even inside the winery, there are doors that we have the wood that we actually reclaim from old farmhouses in the area. So we pulled them off the boards, took the nails out, sand them all down, and then we made them into doors. So that's kind of our business example or philosophy, if you will. We really like to repurpose and reuse things. Even with the bottles that we use at the beginning, we wanted to have a recycling program for our bottles so we could actually reuse them, not break them down, but wash them, steam them, sterilize them, and then reuse them. It is so much more expensive to do that than buy bottles itself.
Right. Yeah.
Not cost effective. So, it is what it is. But yeah, so everything. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Michael, what about you? How do you think that design comes into this business? Where are the places where you find it makes the biggest impact for you?
Well, I everything Scott says resonates, because I think we went through a similar process, and I also compartmentalize everything around the winery into 3 phases. So it's like, how do you grow? How do you make it, and then sell it? And selling is probably is clearly is a very hard part of it. I don't want to minimize the first 2 phases, like making wine, growing. We're lucky. When we bought the winery, just as a bit of an anecdote, we didn't know what we were buying when we bought it, because we bought the winery in the middle of winter. In northern Italy, it was 0 degrees and everything was dormant, and we really didn't know what we had. One of the challenges, I'll talk a bit about this later, is in our area, disease is a large problem. In a lot of European stock with wineries, it's been a traditional problem for well over 100 years. And so we didn't know quite what we were buying, and we didn't realize until later in the cycle of growing how bad that was in terms of yields. But if I go back to design, there's a number of things we did. We also built out a whole new winery. So what we bought was a vineyard. There was no functioning winery on the site at that time, although wine had been made on the property for well over 200 years. And we worked with a local with a local architect, designing really a very sustainable project and property as well. So we've also embraced, it's got to be, if it's in the vineyard, it's got to be biodiverse. It needs to be organic. And we've stopped using pesticides, herbicides, lots of things that were used on the property previously. And it takes years to get some of that stuff out of the system. In terms of the design and development of the structure and the facilities, same types of concept. How do we make them energy efficient? How do we use different types of materials through that design process? So that process took us the better part of 3 years to build out that facility. So it includes both the winery and tasting room type facilities. The interesting one for me has always been label. And is what I call the product, the product packaging, and that for us, I'll just get a couple of examples here if we can see them. We sort of went through a number of different labeling approaches, and this is the same for most wineries, and we decided, and we could not. The logo was very simple for us. It started because the design team that we worked with is a company out of Bergamo. They immediately went on to Google Earth. And if you look up Vinicole Arno on Google Earth, you'll see that that's the shape of our winery, of the vineyards. So the vineyards follow. So they immediately, they picked up on that and immediately used it. And that's been used, that gets used by us repeatedly. So like even on corks, we use it on corks, whether it's a natural or a synthetic cork. But we had a lot of discussion around labeling, and it wasn't something we could easily land on because, well, do you go down a more aesthetic, artistic type approach? And certain vineyards in our area in particular, they commission art pieces to be used as label frontages. We said, well, we're not sure. The problem you have with wine is, and if you look at we're in the 3rd largest growing region in Italy, there's a lot of competition. We're lucky, we have very high quality wine. So we make high quality Barbera and white Monferrato Bianco wine, but so do some of our neighbors. And even though we've won many, many awards for our wines, how do you differentiate that wine on the shelf and to the public? So we went at that time with something that was almost a more high impact type of label, so that if it was with other wines on the shelf or competing, it could sort of grab attention more quickly. So there were some design decisions that happened around the labeling, and then over time we've kind of evolved to a more sort of elegant, streamlined type of approach. But it's been more of an iterative process that's happened over time and not something that happened immediately. And there's been a lot of investment on our part, time-wise and financially as well, to try and tune that over a period of time. And it's what I would call an iterative design process. It's never really ending. And you tend to get very strong opinions from people around things like labels. And it can be positive or negative, and you've got to sort of navigate through that to see, well, what does make sense to me and what do I feel is right in terms of the market we're going out to.
Totally. It's the first thing that consumers see about your wine. It's like the first communication you have with them often, right? Is the label. So that makes a lot of sense. And
I don't know, I know this is, sommeliers and wine experts, well, people shouldn't buy wine that way, but they buy wine based on appearance. If you think about it, when you go to the liquor store and you're looking at label and you don't know a wine or a wine variety, you're going to be attracted by the packaging of that product. It's very clearly something that's going to resonate with the consumer, right?
Yeah, this connection also to our other senses, right? That we can't smell or taste the wine upon seeing it. So we have to sort of allude to that with the design.
Exactly.
Right, Scott, what about you? What does your label look like?
Well, first of all, I totally agree with Michael. He hit on a lot of stuff that I totally agree with. For the label itself, it's like you're tasting the wine with your eyes. It has to get your attention, and you're also looking at it. Does that label look tasty to me? I do it all the time. I go in the liquor store and go, oh, I buy it just because of the label. Because it looks funny or it's artistic or like a wow factor. I don't even know what kind of wine it is. I just buy it because it's what cool. A label, right? It's cool. Yeah. So Our label, well, first of all, our name is Aridus, and it's Latin for dry. I wanted to have a nod to our climate. So it's a dry, arid climate. So I want to have a little nod to Arizona. All of the, Cochise's sons' names have been taken, and all the history, anything that's related to Arizona has already been used. So, and I want to do it in a subtle way. So I thought the name itself is going to work for me. So aridus it's Latin for dry and arid. So I wanted to do something that again reflects where the terroir that we are. So of course, everyone thinks we're in a desert, and there are deserts here, but there's also, you go up to Flagstaff and it's like Canada. It's like it's pine trees, snow, rocks. You would think you're back in Canada. Anyway, so Arizona is very diverse, and I think the challenge for winemakers and designing labels in Arizona is that we're trying to overcome that stigma that it's just desert. So I kind of ran with that idea as well. So on the label itself, these are debossed crackles. So it looks like cracked earth. So, and then the word aridus comes out of it. So I've got a lot of positive comments about it. And it's ongoing because each variety that we do, I change the background color. So, and it's all earth tones or earth colors, if you will. So that's how I designed the label. I did I did work with a design group in Napa that specifically does labels, because I want to bounce the ideas off of them, but I was very involved, of the design process and how it looks and where it is, and they gave me a prototype, based on everything we talked about and my influences and stuff like that, and then I just ran with it. I just ran with whatever we have. Occasionally we will do, once in a while we'll do a separate design label. We do a holiday blend. So the winemaker and I every year just do once a year blend for the holidays, and it's different every year. So I make the label different every year, and it's just to say that it stands out. It's different from the rest of the varieties, the single varieties. All of our wines are single varieties except the holiday blend. So I felt that with the design of, I wanted to try and keep it local. I wanted to try and keep that influence of, hey, where it's coming from, and work with that. Did you see the examples on the website? I can bring some bottles over if you like.
Yeah. I mean, if they're at arm's length, sure, but don't worry about it. We can pop it in the chat maybe too, so people can take a look at it there.
Sure.
But while we're on this topic, I thought it'd be interesting to hear a bit more from both of you about the climates you're working in. Clearly, they have influenced the labels, right, themselves, and of course, they influence the taste of the wine and the way that the wine is grown. Can you talk a bit about the climate and the terroir in which you work, and how the kind of challenges it brings, what you like about working there maybe, and overall, like, what you think it brings to the wine, if possible?
Okay. We're in Northwest Italy, so we're in the area called Piemonte or Piedmont, which is, if you think about Milan, Genoa, and Torino, we're kind of dead in the middle of that triangle. And the region is the Asti region. So there are two main wine growing areas in our region. One is Asti and the other one is Alba. Actually the area that we're in is classified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site as a landscape for vineyards. So it's the main area in Italy that's used for growing Barbera wine. We're not in the same area. The Alba area is more for Barolo and some of those types of wines. But we're in the main Asti Barbera growing area in Italy. The terroir is, we have very heavy silty clay soils, and they're marine influence. So that area at one point in time, millions of years ago, was basically underwater. So there's very heavy, silty, clay-based, marine-based soils. So you actually find fossils in our soils too. So you can find fully intact fossils. Very little rock outcrop. It's why it's good for growing wine is it retains water. So we're actually one of the last remaining areas in Europe and in Italy that's not allowed to irrigate. So we have no irrigation in our area. So you're heavily dependent on rainfall, snowfall in winter to retain water in a very deep rootstock in the plant. The challenge we have now, climatically, summers are very hot, typically 40 to 45 degrees in the daytime. Cooler nights, which is good for growing grapes. The winters, they used to be quite wet, but now they're very dry. So we're not, the lack of moisture and rainfall is becoming a bit of an issue for us. But what we have is the wine that's produced is a very rich red type of wine. The whites can very well balanced. So Sauvignon, and there are a number of different local varietals that grow very well. But the Barbera that we grow, very deep ruby color, and very well balanced wine. It can tend to, if you don't harvest early enough, can tend to go up in terms of sugar level, which directly correlates then into a high alcohol level wine. So what we try to balance in terms of production and crop management is getting in as early as possible, where we still have the balance of everything we need in terms of the equilibrium of the wine. So we get it more around a 14% grade wine. If you go too late, it can easily go over 15% to 16%, which is not good in terms of marketing and sales. But that's the challenge we're having now. Is there are two challenges. One is certainly climate, and the other one is insect control. We tend to be we suffer from. It's not very common in North America, but in Europe there's an insect, a mite in Italy called Flavicenza, that attacks the rootstock of the vine. So we can have, because of that, 10 to 15% loss on crop per year if we don't manage it very carefully. So that's one. Those are the main challenges. But you know what comes out of in terms of our wine production is a very, very complex wine type that's suitable for aging. So it can be aged both steel aged or oak aged, and we do both.
Wow, wonderful. And I'm just remembering, I don't know if we brought this up before, Michael, but your background at NASCAD was environmental design, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Do you find that impacted some of the work you do now? We talked a bit about design in general, but the environmental.
No, and Scott talked about some of that, like even things like the first thing we did when we went in is we mapped every plant.
Yeah.
So we went out as well, and we said we want to know. And as we went through that initial growing season and realized there are some problems here, we went out and we basically spent weeks mapping, 20,000 plants and the characteristics of every plant. So yes, we've some of that training also came into play there, right? And so, yeah.
I love it. Well, Scott, I'd love to hear more about the Arizona growing region that you're working in. Tell us about where your wine is grown and made.
Absolutely. The little town of Wilcox is 4,200 feet in elevation, and then the vineyard's about a 45-minute drive upwards to about 5,200 feet. So with that, it comes with all kinds of challenges. We get frost, we get rain. We also have monsoon. We have monsoon, which is this really dramatic cloud, lightning, rain, hail thing that happens in July, all the way from July to the end of October. So the humidity goes up because right now it's usually dry. It's very non-humid here. Excuse me. So when the monsoon comes in, humidity happens, bugs happen, lightning, you name it, flooding, everything happens during the monsoon. So that just that alone, that's a big challenge, because we could probably grow anything in Arizona with our climate, except for some of those varieties that don't like water, like one Zinfandel. It's very tight knit berries, and it's very susceptible to rot. So if it gets rained on, it gets a lot of mold. And, we have that monsoon that happens. And so there's certain varieties that are challenging to plant or grow. Another one is Chardonnay. It's kind of a cold climate-ish plant, and we have trouble growing that. But I'm bringing this up because Arizona is still new at this. I think we're only finding out what we can and can't grow in the last 5-10 years. There's been a lot of history of other people planting things here, seeing if it works, seeing if it doesn't. And, so we're still new at this, and the people have been trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And so there was that challenge. And of course, we're in the desert, so water's an issue. So we don't get rain other than the monsoon, and that's can be iffy, and that can be too much. That's just overkill. So everything is we use well water, and of course that's political right now. In Arizona, the water is it's a political issue because we're going to run out of it. But grapes, we don't generally water during the winter, and it's only when they're starting to grow. So it's very water efficient. Grapes are very water efficient. So I think it's a good crop for Arizona. Just to give you an indication, what we can do is farmers can grow corn 4 times a year. It just blows my mind. I mean, in Canada, it's like you grow it once and that's it for the year, right? You wait till 4 times.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so again, stress on water, because that, it takes a lot of water. So we've also got, we're also figuring out insects, because that's something that's, because again, it's relatively new. We generally don't use any kind of herbicide or insecticide. And we have birds that come in, and so we have netting on that. And again, the common theme here is we're still figuring it out. Since we do have so much sun, we have Viognier, and so we actually put a higher mesh over top of it to reduce the sun, because it's so much sun, it can actually burn the berries, and we don't want that. Or they grow too fast, or they, you have to pick them at maybe not the ideal bricks that you want. So there's those kind of challenges, just because we do have so much sunlight, unlike in California where they have the sunlight and the weather, but they have this fog coastal influence that slows things down. So they have fog in the morning, and then it kind of breaks up by 3, and they have a couple hours of sunshine, and then it all starts again. So they have the perfect kind of growing climate, We don't have that. So there's other ways that we're figuring out how all that works. So there's this, and the soil itself, it's built on basically a riverbed. It's rock after rock after rock after rock. We had to have jackhammers to put holes in for each plant. That's how tough the soil is. But you know what? They love it. They absolutely love it. And they're thriving. And we also have, interesting enough, we got soil testing all the way around the 40 acres. There was a section on the corner of the property that tested high in salt. And we don't know why. We don't know how it got there, because we have a creek that goes through, but it's not a saltwater creek. We just can't figure out where the salt is coming from or where it came from. But that just made that little part of the property unusable or unplantable. So, so a barn had to go up there. So guess where the barn had to go? So I had to let go of my master plan of how the whole layout of the vineyard and barn is going to look, because actually the earth actually made the decision for me, because I plant that there. So yeah, there's that. I talked about the varieties, the different varieties. So we're kind of figuring, like I said, we're figuring out what works and what doesn't, and relying on the people that have already tried and see what works and what doesn't. But generally, we have 16 different varietals.
Yeah.
So yeah, 16 different varietals. And yeah, not, of course, it's more on the red side than the white for now.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating like lens to look through design with, because it's an industry where you have a lot of control over certain things and not a lot of control over a lot of things, especially when it comes to farming, right? But with that in mind, I'd love to maybe take one more question and then we'll turn it over to questions from the audience. I'd love to hear about how you both balance tradition and innovation in your work, especially where I think, Scott, you're working in a relatively new kind of wine area, and Michael, you're working in one that's more tradition. And so I'd love to hear how you both balance traditional practices, tradition of making, growing wine, with innovations in the industry, old and new in wine.
Sure. I think there's some interest, like if we look at winemaking across the board, I mean, globally over the last 50 years, it's changed dramatically in many ways. But there's a bit of two sides to the coin here. One is we've certainly seen the impact of automation on processes, right? So we don't automate harvesting, but automated harvesting is done significantly. We're all hand harvested because we're smaller, obviously, but there are, and our slopes are not conducive to that as well. We're on very steep slope base. But automated harvesting is used a lot. But if we even look at winemaking and how winemaking has changed, 50 years ago, there's a lot of manual efforts, right, that went into making wine. Now we can make wine much faster from the initial point of selection, pre-selection, even with all of the work we do around doing the selection of our grapes and bringing them in, to actually go from that into the vinification process is a rapid process because of automation. So we have automated presses. We have machines that destem for us. So there's a lot of stuff that happens that has improved the quality of the initial product that can quickly go from grape and into the vinification process, which is really important for the improving quality levels. But if we look at the other side, other processes like aging, there's not much you can do with aging.
Yeah.
You still need a barrel or a tank that is an inert, it's either an inert object like a tank, which doesn't impart any flavor in, and you leave it in there for a number of months, or it goes from that tank into a barrel or into a large barrel. So we use both 300 liter and over 2,500 liter barrels for aging our wine. And it has to stay there. And then you just have to maintain it, look after it, make sure it's moving along okay. But there's not much you can do in that process. There are a few interventions here and there, but it's relatively lightweight in terms of what you can do. And then you have to bottle it. And okay, that's an automated process now that's a lot more sophisticated than it used to be. But then it has to stay in the bottle for a certain period of time as well. So there's not a lot that has changed in that side of the world. But certainly automation has made an impact, and we need to use automated processes just to help us with either quality or increasing the time to get things done, right, at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Scott, what about you?
Let me start off by just my experience. I think everybody wants or thinks that a winery and a vineyard is so romantic and wouldn't it be lovely to have a vineyard. See, I do it. It's not. It's a lot of work, and that romanticism goes away real fast when you're involved.
Yeah, it's very much like that. Yeah,
it's a lot of work. So yeah, that romantic idea is just gone. I lost that a long time ago, but I still love it. Don't get me wrong; it's a lot of fun. And I'm kind of a gadget guy. I love gadgets. And there's this big symposium in January in San Francisco where all the wineries and anybody across the world goes there, because there's workshops and there's gadgets and there's everything available in technology related to wine and winemaking. I have to leave my credit card at home because I bring up almost anything. But yeah, so I like gadgets. I like the process, and that comes in very handy with the at the winery. So I think we have a lot of the up-to-date gadgets, and it's just a lot more efficient. I think it makes more wine. We lose less wine because we got a centrifuge. It actually spins wine and takes all the particulates that we want out. And it's very efficient, as opposed to the traditional way where the wine sits in the barrel and then you have a pump that actually sucks out the wine to that level where all the sediment is, and then you stop. So you can imagine you're losing a lot of wine just at the bottom of each barrel. There's still the potential to have some wine in there, but the centrifuge takes over that, and it takes, you lose a lot of wine just doing the traditional way. So again, there's a romantic way of doing things, and there's the kind of a modern way of doing things, and I think if you talk to anybody in the wine industry, they're starting to update their systems. And sure, maybe there are some very specialized ones where they do that on purpose. Maybe they don't do all of that. Like some of the wineries I saw in California, they have this thing called gravity feed. So there's no pumps. It's just gravity going from one level to another. And it's supposed to be very gentle for the wine. I love that.
Yeah.
But to build a winery around just that alone is very expensive, for one.
Yes.
And you have to start from the beginning. You'd have to design something like that, which I'd love to do one day, maybe.
The next vineyard.
Next vineyard, yeah.
The next one. Just quickly before we turn it over to our audience questions, do you guys have advice for people with design backgrounds like yourselves who are interested in entering these fields that we don't traditionally associate directly with design, like wine? Do you have any advice for people like that?
Well, I mean, if I look at my experience, I had a design background, and I'd done things throughout my career that had, people would say, well, that had nothing to do with what you studied or whatever, or, and I think the best thing is you've got to be open-minded to anything, and you can do anything at the end of the day. Okay, I'm fortunate that I reached a certain point where we could invest in this and create this type of business. But all along the way, it's just a way of looking, as I said, a way of looking at the world that you should be open to taking on anything. Not feel like I've got some reservation because I don't have the background to do that. I mean, I know certain professional fields are obviously different, right? But there's anything in the business world, a design background is a very, very valuable tool to how you can approach it, and you can deal with things and look at the world in a different way than traditional people with business backgrounds or schooling backgrounds that just had business, right?
Totally. Yeah, and not pigeonhole yourself as a designer.
Yeah,
Scott, what do you think? Oh, sorry, Michael. No, continue.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
I was just thinking back. When it was at NSCAD, I guess the ultimate goal for me at that time was to work for a design studio, work for an advertising agency. And that was my goal. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. And I think that was the only option or any kind of career. So I think I kind of had blinders on. And then I jumped around for, different companies. And I ended up going to one that is a architectural firm that does environmental graphics, which is something, completely, sure, it's all visual, it's all design, but I never thought of, wayfinding signs for the airport or signs in hotels and studios, and it's all around us. But I thought, wow, this is kind of blowing my mind. This is kind of fun. So I think it just my blinders are starting to come off a bit and going, it really does it opens up a lot of opportunities as long as you're open to say, okay, I just don't want a career, or maybe you do. I mean, I did, just in one area. If you just keep your eyes and ears open, I mean, there's an opportunity for design and visuals everywhere. And it's also a learning process. I mean, we learn a lot. I mean, all the stuff that I've learned in NSCAD is definitely still there. But going back to that time, there were no computer graphics. I mean, we had no computers, right? And I come from a computer background, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to go back to art school, to try and mesh the computer and design. And it just wasn't there yet when I was going to school. And even when I graduated, there was still that awkwardness of where computers are. Should we switch over, or we're just going to do it manually? And it was still that little, that everyone was going to try and convert to using computers. So it was a very kind of difficult or interesting time, so and I just did it myself. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna buy it. I'm gonna buy Apple computer. I'm gonna buy all the software. I'm gonna just do it myself because I enjoy doing it. And yeah, there's things like that you have to keep up and keep learning.
What do you have a favorite part of the winemaking process? Like, is there a part like you relish the most above everything? Or I'm sorry, I keep saying winemaking. I'm using that pretty broadly. Vintning process, growing process, etc.
I think for me, I always enjoy, even though it's hard, is real to go. Scott made a good point. It's really dirty work, but it's enjoyable at the same time. I enjoy harvest. I enjoy that process when you go and get, we can get the grape. There's this excitement that builds up to that point where we're testing, we're doing an analysis, we're seeing, is it ready, There's a whole process around that, and then going in and doing it. It's backbreaking work because we do everything manually with some equipment, obviously. And then the process of seeing it transform, that transformation it goes through almost immediately, right, to get into that state. And then there's a whole sensual thing around this. There's like, you get the grape, but the whole winery, like the smell that's coming out, there's a whole sort of sensual experience around this thing that lasts for at least a couple of weeks, right, that we go through this process, and then it's done, and it's into more of a dormant state, and then you're back to what you were doing before. So for me, it's that's the most that to me is the most satisfying period around the whole event. The other sides, like selling and the other things, not so nice. We have to do them, but they're not things I particularly relish as much anymore, right? So
yeah. Scott, what about you?
Favorite part. Well, let me start with something, just a little interesting thing. People ask me, like, what do you do all day? Do you just sit around and drink wine all day, don't you? That's your job. And it's kind of funny because, we do tasting trials at 9 o'clock in the morning, but we're not consuming. I mean, you have to, spit it out because there's going to be lots of tasting. It's not a drinking, but one day we're all sitting around the conference room. We're all doing wine tasting trials, and I involve the staff to be involved with that too. I want their input on it. And the UPS guy comes around and in the door, and he's just looking at us at the conference room with all the glasses and all the wine. And he just shakes his head and just drops his package and walks out. So yeah, I kind of we don't drink wine all day. It's actually a lot of work. I couldn't function if I was going to be drinking wine all day. I think for me, I get a little nervous. It's a little chaotic around harvest because a lot of things are happening. A lot of there's things at the vineyard. There's grapes coming from the vineyard and picking and help, and then it gets to the winery. It's I find it stressful, but it's also in a good way. It's a it's definitely an energy.
Yeah.
And I can feel it off the staff too. Like they love it and they hate it all at the same time. You know, they look forward to it, and we all do. And we try to make it as fun as possible. I guess I worry. I'm a worrier. So I'm thinking, oh my God, what's going to go wrong? The truck's going to break down, or you know, whatever. So I do like it, but I think I like being in the vineyard more, just watching it grow, helping it, or, you know, getting it to the spot what we want. I think I enjoy that part. I think I enjoy the growing part a little more than actually doing the winemaking, even though I like the winemaking.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does. We've got someone in the chat with a question. Let me just pull it up. Sorry about my phone, so it's a bit awkward. Julian is in the chat asking, saying, thank you both for speaking today. I had a question about other fields you potentially might have entered inside of the design agro field. Beyond wine, are there any other crops or products you see design being beneficial for?
I think that what we deal with on wine packaging would cut across the agri-food sector. It's not, we're not unique. I think it's certainly a unique product type, but you see it in beer, you'd see it in other beverage type products, right? That the same type of principles that we're dealing with, they're dealing with in those sectors or those industries as well. And certainly food packaging is a huge field as well. So yeah, I think there are many other places or other opportunities in other areas. Yeah,
absolutely. One second, and then maybe Scott, if you will answer quickly, and then we've got someone who's going to do it with their camera after that. But Scott, do you have any other experience with growing, or do you have any thoughts on what Michael said?
You know what? I think you can expand to almost anything. I mean, I would love to design a perfume bottle. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, and in that time, record labels, you know, there's a lot of things where it can just be applied to, I think. So it's not just
totally. Wonderful. Thank you. Lisa, you had a question. If you want to turn your camera on now and ask that, go ahead.
Yeah. Can you guys see me or hear me?
Yeah.
Hey,
I can hear you.
Oh, you guys can't see me?
I can see you.
Oh, okay.
I can see you.
Yeah, my question is this. I am an artist. I live not far from Wilcox, actually. I live near Benson. So I don't know. I don't even know. I'm on your email list and I occasionally drink your wine, but I joined the Zoom because I would love some of my little paintings to be on a wine label. And I've kind of like searched here. I joined a group in California, and the problem is, like, I have these little paintings, and I have a singular painting. I'm like, oh, this would be so great on a wine label. How do I get started? Because when people want a vineyard or they have a vision, they already have like their own design in mind. It's so personal. And I need to try to meet someone or find someone out there that's still in that open phase, or I don't even know how to go about it. And I'm just curious how you guys think I could meet someone who hasn't well, like Michael said, his logo is the shape of the vineyard, and Aridus is, of course, the dry earth. And here I have this painting. I'm like, it needs to be on the wine label. Where do I start? Yeah, good question, huh?
That is a good question. I would I'm just saying, is there something you could do digitally, like maybe have a gallery of potential wine labels that you could put online and just say, here's kind of my portfolio, and I could we're a custom crush facility, so we actually make more wine for other people as well, and they're generally starting out. So sometimes they have like you said, they have their own ideas of what they want for a label. And then sometimes they just come to me and say, hey, can you do a label for me? But that said, you also have to be aware that there's a lot of regulations to the front and back of the wine label, so exact it has to get approved by the government, the federal government. So there's a specific font size, there's certain wordings that you can and can't say. It's very complicated. So you have to keep that in mind too. Even though you have this, beautiful image, there's going to have to be some copy or some information on there that's required legally. And all of that gets approved by the government, just to keep you in what's ahead.
But that is an idea, either your facility or somewhere that is making wine. I know yours probably isn't the only one that does it, but that makes wine for a lot of smaller vineyards or even home vineyards, something like that, people starting out. So that's one idea. Okay.
Yeah, there are people in Italy that do that as well, that they make wine for others, and they then have a requirement for labeling. And you're right as well. I mean, the challenge is people kind of go in with it becomes a very contentious, labeling becomes a contentious area. But I like a lot of artistically driven labels. And it's an area to, see if you can connect with other firms that are doing labeling, like Scott mentioned, there's folks in California that are doing labeling, and they typically you will get, wineries that commission, they will commission an artistic piece for a label. And they're not, it's not all sort of fairly stock type label types that get used. But you need to connect with firms that are doing that type. Like around us, there are companies that do they do label work, right? More from a printing production standpoint, but I have not seen a lot go into the design side there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those are great ideas. Well, I just thought I would also learn something about labeling while I'm here. I'm like, I'll just work in my studio, which is a complete disaster, as you can see, and I'll listen to this lovely talk about vineyards.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thanks,
Lisa. Everybody. All right. We might have time for one more question. If anybody in the chat or on their video wants to pop back on.
I'm muted, so I'll start that again.
Sorry.
I wanted to say hi to Scott. I couldn't let it go without saying hi. We were in NASCAD together, so now you've just given me so many more reasons to come down to Arizona. I want to go through and see everything that you've got going there, and really enjoyed both talks. And Italy has been on my wish list. Now I know where I'm going to go, Michael.
Well, you need to stop by and see us, because
absolutely
they're both beautiful locations.
I could not jump in. I'm at work, so I'm on lunch, so I can flip on the video now. But I said I'll have to at least say hi, and really interesting. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay, we had one last question. Kara was wondering about selling. Michael, you mentioned that bringing product to market was really challenging, and I think I saw on your website that you're selling like mostly within Europe. Do you guys have like one quick thing to say about selling wine and the trickiness there, perhaps?
Well,
what that market is like?
Yeah, we sell right now just a lot into different parts of Northern Europe, so Scandinavia. We sell into Canada, in Ontario, and a lot locally. So the local markets is a really important market for us. Either directly out of the winery, which is our most profitable sale, and then it's going out from there to local restaurants, and within our regional area as well. That's where we ideally like to have the majority of our sales going, but now it's more balanced towards export.
Right.
The trouble with the export market is it's the lowest margin product that we have going out. So it's you're getting into a lot of competition, and they're very challenging in terms of the price points that you have to meet to get wine out. It's great to move a lot of wine that we need to do, obviously, as well, but the challenge is you need to balance it out. So we're putting much more effort into, particularly as we move forward now, even though we've got a lot of export sales, into local and local regional sales as well. So that for us, it means going to places like Milan, Torino, large cities, you know, Zurich, where there's captive markets and we can get higher margin on the product.
Definitely. Well, it sounds very complicated.
It's complicated, but it's something you have to gradually work through it. The good thing about wine is it doesn't, even though there's some products, there's a more of an immediacy in selling. With wine, you tend to have more runway, but you still have to, like our winemaker tells us all the time, because he also sells his own wine, you got to sell the wine. So at some point in time, you know, you can't have wine just sitting around in your cellars all the time, you know, inventory up. So it's about selling the wine as well at some point, and there are difficult decisions that get made there as well.
Mm.
Can I just add something there?
Please.
I totally agree with what Michael's saying. So there's this balance of, do I sell it to this particular establishment or do I not? And I say that because you have to be aware of your brand. So if you put your brand in Walmart, what does that say about your brand? Right. But if it's in a high class Hilton restaurant, then what does that say about your brand? So we have to make these decisions. Are we going to just sell it off? But you also have to be aware where your product is placed, for sure. Yeah.
I think just to add one more thing, because we're also selling a lot of wine now online.
Oh, yeah.
So the online channel is going to increasingly become the dominant wine channel. And we're only at the start of that process now. So we're going to see a lot of things happen over the next 5 to 10 years that are going to dramatically change how the consumer. Now in Canada, we're very challenged because of our provincial liquor structure, right, that we have. And so there's still a lot of control, but that's going to get broken down over the next 5 to 10 years. And then we're seeing that trend starting to happen globally as well.
I started to see that, just adding to that I think the online sales increased. We saw increase in sales during the COVID lockdown periods because people didn't want to go out there ordering things. And that's where I think where they got the idea. And we were doing like Zoom tastings. And so people kind of got used to the idea of having or ordering wine online. Before that, I thought it was very difficult because they want to taste it, right? They want to see the bottle. They want to look at it. They want to try it. That was very difficult to sell it online. But I think after the lockdown, where people are now used to buying things online, especially wine and other liquor products, it opened up a door for us. I think the sales are definitely increased for us as well.
Yeah.
Currently buy either of your wines online if we were to go onto your website. Is that happening yet, or is that something you're thinking about in the future?
Well, if you're in Canada, no.
No.
Only if you're in Ontario right now is there a way to get our wine. So that's something we want to make sure that we can broaden the Canadian consumer access, right, to our product. In Europe, it's easier. We sell into 18 different countries in Europe, and into the US we can sell directly off our website as well.
Right. But the next trip I take to Ontario, I can grab some of yours there.
We have in Ontario, I see there's a question about in Ontario, we have a wine agency here called Cello Blue Wines that has our wine available now as well, but not through the liquor store. We still have to work through the LCBO in Ontario. We have no way around that. But the agents can sell our wine, and there's an agency in Toronto that sells our wine as well.
Scott, where can we buy your wine?
You're going to have to come down here, unfortunately. Yeah, we had one of our varietal blends shipped to Ontario. That was a number of years ago, which is a one-time blend, and we did get into liquor stores on Ontario, but it was one time only. And unfortunately can't order wine to be shipped to Canada on the website or outside of the States right now. It's a big deal just trying to orchestrate shipping wine from one state to another, just like it is in Canada, going from one province to another. It's politics, and it's licensing, and it's alcohol, unfortunately.
Yeah. Sounds like a nightmare. Well, we'll just have to come and visit your beautiful vineyards, both of you.
Yes.
So thank you guys so much for joining us today. It was such a treat to talk to you. So
Thank you.
fascinating to learn about.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was. Thanks, Molly.
Thank you, Molly.